So continuing on with vocab for 3-1, the next one we left off on was a constant. Now these next two can get a little confusing because they both start with C's, but it's important to keep them apart. Constant is a number without a variable. And when you hear the word constant, it makes you think of the same. If something is constantly happening, it's happening over and over and over again. So a number without a variable always remains the same. Nothing can happen to it. Like if I have just the number 5 and I tell you that x is equal to 4, x equaling 4 has nothing to do with that number 5. So a number without a variable is just simply a constant. It could be literally any kind of number. It can be fractions, decimals, whole numbers, repeating decimals, negative numbers, positives. So, you could have 5, you could have negative 1/4, you could have, 0.6 repeating, negative 2.7. Any kind of number without a variable is a constant. Not to be confused with a coefficient, which is the number in front of a variable. So if I'm looking at something like 3x, the coefficient is that 3, the number in front of the variable. The x is not part of the coefficient. It's just the number in front of it. So another example, if I have something like negative 7y. In that situation, the negative 7 is the coefficient because that's the number in front. When we have no visible coefficient, so like if I just had a plain old x, there is a number that's always in front of that x that we can't see, that we assume is there if we see none. And if we look at this 3x and this 7, or this negative 7y, the operation going on between the 3x and the negative 7y, like the operation going on between the 3 and the x and the negative 7 and the y, is multiplication. So what number can I multiply x by and get the same exact thing? That would be 1. So when we don't see a coefficient, when there is no visible coefficient, we can assume that it's 1. Just like that x, that 1x in front of it. All right, so moving on to exponents. An exponent, which you guys are super familiar with already, maybe not super familiar with, but you're definitely familiar with it. An exponent represents, it's a smaller raised number that represents repeated multiplication. So what I mean by that is if we have something like 4 to the third power, that doesn't mean 4 times 3. That doesn't give us 12. 4 to the third power means that I am repeatedly multiplying 4 3 times. 4 times 4 times 4. That repeated multiplication. I can also do the same kind of thing with variables. If I had, say, x to the 5th power, that's still, notice first how the 5 is a smaller raised number like 3 was. They're not written right next to each other like coefficients. X to the 5th would be multiplying x 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That repeated multiplication. That's another 3. So let's do factor on this one and then we'll do the last 3. A factor is also something that you should be relatively familiar with because you've been factoring things, finding least common, nope, those are multiples, greatest common factors and stuff like that. So factors are just numbers or variables. It can be either or. So in the past, you've dealt with a lot of factors with numbers. The factors of 12. Your factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, because I can multiply those numbers and get up to that 12. But it also, remember, it can be variables. So keep that in mind, that factors can also be variables. That's going to be the new piece to this unit.